Well, in just a moment, we'll get the reaction of business leaders. But first, our political editor, Faisal Islam, reports.
After years of dither and delay, holding pattern on extra runways, the government in theory accepts the idea of airport expansion in the southeast. But after the Downing Street Cabinet Committee tonight, the final decision on where deferred again.
There are reasons why you could look at other options, and we've got to do that. We've got to do that in fairness to the people who live in and around the area. It is right that we take the time to get this decision. So Gatwick is definitely an option. Heathrow is an option.
This the formal response to the Davis Report, an independent commission on airport expansion in the southeast. A number of proposals were originally submitted, but ultimately 3 options were shortlisted: a second runway at Gatwick, or 2 options at Heathrow, extending the northern runway to the west, or building a third runway at the airport. This was the proposal that the Commission ultimately decided on, though it didn't rule out Gatwick expansion as well. The Davis Commission found that expansion would generate £147 billion over 60 years and create more than 70,000 jobs by 2050. This was the Prime Minister's response at the time.
There is the need for additional airport capacity in the southeast of England, not least to maintain this country's competitiveness. But the guarantee I can give to the Honourable Lady is that a decision will be made by the end of the year.
That guarantee seems to have created more indecision, if anything, as the southeast of England awaits its first new airport runway since the 1940s. Now it appears a delay at least until after the London mayoral elections in May. That will prevent Zac Goldsmith, the Conservative candidate, having to resign. But the delays may be even longer than that. The official rationale for delay is that Heathrow has so far failed to convince on air pollution, carbon emissions and noise restrictions, despite a ban on night flights and a 4th runway ban too.
What's happened in the last few weeks and months is it really has become obvious to everybody involved with the issue that it is really much more complicated than the Howard Davis report made clear. The air pollution issues are very, very serious indeed. The noise pollution issues are basically insoluble if you're going to have planes flying over the whole of London to get to the airport. And then, as I say, there's this basic knockout problem that because of the constraints of the site, you can't deliver the long-term capacity that London and this country needs.
This could provide a pretext for a delay even to the end of the Prime Minister's term of office, enabling him to keep his no ifs, no buts promise against Heathrow expansion in 2009. 5 cabinet ministers, including the Home Secretary and the Foreign Secretary, have affected constituencies, but the opposition no more united on this.
There's a number of issues that have to be raised. One is the 4 questions we're putting about capacity, about the effects on climate change, about environment and about noise. Those are the questions that have to be answered before any decision can be made. Merely putting off decisions isn't helpful. Those questions have got to be answered.
Some business groups call the decision gutless, others deeply disappointing.
We want to grow our businesses, so that's about export opportunities. We're already, as London, losing out to Frankfurt, to Amsterdam and Paris as they seize new opportunities in new cities. So every month that passes by, the competition gets further ahead, and as business we don't like to lose.
For many in Westminster, this represents the latest example of the inability of Britain to get vital projects finished, or indeed started. Faisal Islam, Sky News.
Well, I'm joined now by the London mayoral candidate, Sadiq Khan, and also Colin Stanbridge, who's the CEO of the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us. Colin, if I can start with you. We heard the Prime Minister say there, a decision will be made by the end of the year. Well, literally, he's correct. A decision has been made, but a decision to delay the decision.
I'm not sure a decision, when you don't make any decision, can be called a decision. It's profoundly depressing. I think that it's a cliche to say that, being in government, being a Prime Minister is about making difficult decisions, but it's a cliche because it's true. Now, hugely difficult decision about runways, but that's what you're in the job for. That's what business people will expect. And what business people will be more worried about, they're very worried about the fact that it's kicking the can down the road, just losing the can even. They'll be more worried that this has been taken as a short-term political gain, that somehow the Conservatives are worried about losing the mayoral election and therefore they want to avoid a row. Well, What happens if Zach Goldsmith gets elected? And then they decide to make the right decision, the third runway at Heathrow, then there's going to be a row anyway. So what's the short-term... What is even the short-term gain on this? There's no short-term gain even on this.
Well, let's speak to one man who certainly hopes that Zach Goldsmith isn't going to be the next Mayor of London. Sadiq Khan, what is the Labour Party's position in all of this? We heard Jeremy Corbyn there saying a delay is insufferable, but we've still got plenty of questions. I mean, you've made your mind up clearly.
Yeah, what the government should have done today was to say yes to a new runway at Gatwick, which will mean more jobs, it will mean growth, it won't have the same problems in relation to air quality and noise pollution, but also it will mean better competition, raising the standards at Heathrow so Heathrow can be a better airport rather than a bigger one. And rather than making a decision, the delay and the dither doesn't help London's businesses, doesn't help London, doesn't help the South East, doesn't help UK. It just helps the Conservative Party's internal politics and machinations. That's bad for London. And what the government should have done was say yes to Gatwick today.
Still, doesn't the prevarication reflect equally as badly on the very well-funded opposite sides of this argument, Heathrow and Gatwick? I mean, what was the point of the Davis Commission if its recommendations aren't followed?
The reality is this. Last year in London alone, almost 10,000 Londoners died as a direct result of air quality. There are children in parts of London whose lungs are underdeveloped. And this year, the Supreme Court in London held that our air was in breach of air quality directive. So our air is a killer, it makes you sick, and it's illegal. In those circumstances, you can't possibly say yes to Heathrow, but there's an alternative. You can address the needs of increase in flight capacity, meet the needs of London's businesses, compete with our European partners by saying yes to Gatwick. All they're going to do is delay and dither, which means bad news for London, bad news for the South East, and bad news for the UK.
I mean, the truth is, we need runways at Gatwick and Heathrow. I mean, politicians have got to take a really difficult decision. If this was a difficult decision, then obviously getting 2 runways or even 3 runways in the South East are going to be even more difficult. But that's what we really need if we're going to compete as a world nation and a world city. And we need politicians to understand that there are some times when you have to get the party politics out of all of this and just say, I'm doing it because it's good for the country. I know it might seem, an odd thing to do for a politician rather than the sort of short-term political game, but actually that's what the country accepts. We're talking about the biggest infrastructure decision we will take this decade, perhaps the last couple of decades. You can't mess around with it. It's too important for that.
But Mr Stunbridge, part of the reason that the Prime Minister has been able to take this backdoor option, push things through the long grass and into the bushes, is because Howard Davis himself said, look, we were recommending Heathrow, looks perfect to us, but you might just want to cast your eyes over the figures for air emissions.
It has to be a final government decision. That's what Howard knows. And that's what... You've got some great brains there. John Armitt, the hero of the Olympics. Why don't the government just take a step back and say, these people, 2.5 years, we've spent another 6 months looking at it, surely they're right. And if there's environmental concerns, obviously environmental concerns are very important, but so are economic concerns. But environmental concerns are really important. Just say to Heathrow, just let me finish. Just say to Heathrow, these are the rules, these are the regulations you've got to do. If you can meet those, we'll go by the Davis Commission and you can go ahead. Why do you have to say we need another inquiry? It just looks as if you're trying to delay the decision. Well, what's the reason? Well, people are going to say, maybe, and I heard Boris say earlier, oh, no, it couldn't be that. Well, I'm afraid a lot of people are going to say it is that. It's a short-term political gain, and that's wrong.
Look, we can get the jobs that we need in London. We can get the growth London desperately needs. We can make sure we don't have the same air quality problems and noise pollution problems. We can improve the competition for Heathrow by saying yes to Gatwick. It could be said yes. Gatwick can then get going with having a new runway. If the government says yes to Heathrow, it's years and years and years of legal challenges. If Heathrow doesn't expand, even now without a new runway, there are problems meeting the air quality demands placed by the Supreme Court.
That if the government granted the decision to Gatwick, there wouldn't be years and years of legal challenges.
But no, they wouldn't. Let me tell you why. The numbers of people affected by a new runway at Heathrow is more than the numbers affected by Paris, Madrid, Brussels and Amsterdam added together. That's before you get to the Supreme Court judgment. Rather than all those decades of delay, say yes to Gatwick, let's get going and start back in business, back in London. And as Colin said, start having some guts.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Sadiq Khan, Colin Stanbridge, thank you both for your input this evening.